If you had told me a few years ago that I would end up dragging my own mum and my aunt into court over my grandma's mountain lodge, I would have laughed in your face. I was the quiet one in my family, the peacemaker, the girl who said sorry just to stop everyone fighting. But that was before my grandma died and left me a $1.3 million lodge, and before I saw what my family was really capable of. The first sign was how my mum looked at me when the lawyer read the will. It wasn't confusion or surprise. It was hatred. Like I'd just stolen something straight out of her hands. My name's Emily. I'm 28, and I grew up in Colorado, about an hour from this old wooden lodge tucked up in the mountains. My grandma Ruth owned it. Well, owned sounds simple, but the place was her whole world. It was a bed and breakfast when I was a kid, and half my childhood smells like coffee, pine trees, and those cinnamon rolls she baked for guests. My dad left when I was 10. My mom, Linda, always said he was weak and selfish, but deep down I knew their constant fighting pushed him away. After he left, she got even more bitter, especially toward my grandma. She blamed Grandma for meddling and spoiling me. But Grandma was the only one who ever made me feel safe. I spent every school break-up at the lodge. She taught me how to change sheets in 5 minutes, how to fix a leaky tap with duct tape, how to listen when guests started telling their life stories. She'd look at me over the breakfast counter sometimes and say, "Em, people show you who they are when there's money or stress on the table. Believe what they show you." I thought I understood that. I didn't. Not really. Not until she died. She had a stroke on a Tuesday. I was at work, doing spreadsheets at the small accounting firm where I'm an assistant. My phone rang, and it was my Aunt Cheryl, my mum's older sister. Cheryl never called me. Ever. I knew it was bad before I even picked up. "Emily, it's Grandma," she said, and her voice was weirdly flat. "She's gone." The world kind of fuzzed around the edges. I don't remember much of that day, just driving up those winding roads to the lodge, my hands shaking on the wheel, thinking, no, not her, anyone but her. The lodge looked wrong without her in it, too still. Mum was standing outside, arms folded, next to Cheryl. My cousins Tyler and Becca were on the porch, smoking. No one hugged me. I walked up the steps, waiting for someone to say something, to cry, to bring us together in one of those sad movie moments. Instead, Mum looked me up and down and said, "Well, I hope you're happy. She was stressing about you the last few weeks." That was the first cut. I hadn't even seen my grandma's body yet, and somehow it was already my fault. What I didn't know then was that they had already started talking about the lodge. Before the funeral. Before the will. Before I had even got there. We had the funeral that Friday in town. Grandma's friends filled up the small church, and story after story came out about how she'd helped people, loaning money she didn't really have, letting families stay at the lodge for free when they were going through something. Mum sat stiff in the front row, dabbing at her eyes, but never really crying. Cheryl kept whispering to her, and I could feel their eyes on me every time the pastor said the word inheritance or legacy. A week later, I got the call from a law office in Denver. "Ms. Carter, this is Jacob Winters, your grandmother's attorney. I'd like to schedule a time for you and your family to come in for the reading of the will." I told Mum that night when I came by her house with takeout, trying to bridge whatever weird gap had opened up between us. She didn't even look surprised. "Of course there's a will, Emily," she said, lighting a cigarette. She always liked her documents. "We'll go. We'll get things settled. We'll sell that old place. And finally we can move on." Something in the way she said "we" bothered me, but I let it go. I was still drowning in grief. On the day of the will reading, we all drove separately to the lawyer's office, which already tells you how united we were. Mum and Cheryl in one car, my cousins in another, and me alone, following behind like some outsider. Mr. Winters was an older man with a kind face and a very organized desk. He asked us to sit, then opened a thick folder. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears, even though I kept telling myself, "You don't care about the money. You just want to know what she wanted." He started with the small stuff. Personal items, a few savings accounts that went to charity, some jewelry for my cousins. Tyler rolled his eyes when he realized he was only getting her old pickup truck. Becca frowned when her name was attached to some antique furniture Grandma loved. Then Mr. Winters cleared his throat. Regarding the real property commonly known as Pinecrest Lodge, the room went still. I felt all their eyes on me, and I had this sudden sick feeling in my stomach. It is the express wish of Ruth Carter that the lodge, the surrounding 5 acres of land, and all operating accounts attached to it be left solely and entirely to my granddaughter, Emily Carter. Silence. I heard the words. I understood them. But for a second it was like they just floated in the air above us and didn't land. Mum was the first to react. She let out this sharp, disbelieving laugh. "No, that's not right. Read it again." Mr. Winters, staying calm, repeated it. Exactly the same. Cheryl's face went red. "That can't be legal," she snapped. "We're her daughters. She can't just skip us and give everything to her? Her, not Emily, not your child, just her." Mr. Winters folded his hands. "Mrs. Davis, Ms. Carter was of sound mind when she signed this will. There are medical letters in the file confirming her mental capacity. She wrote a letter of intent explaining her decision. I can read it if you'd like." "I'd like to see the date on that will," Mum cut in. Her voice was low and dangerous. "Because my mother wasn't thinking straight the last few months. Emily was up there all the time, weren't you, Em? Whispering in her ear? It was like being slapped." "What? No, She asked me to help with the bookings after her knee surgery, that's all. I didn't," Tyler snorted. "Yeah, right. Help. You mean convince her to cut out her own daughters." I looked at Mr. Winters, desperate for someone to say, "This is ridiculous." He met my eyes and very gently slid a paper across the desk. "Your grandmother also left a personal letter for you, Emily. It's in the file, but I'd like to give it to you privately after this meeting if that's all right." Mum's hand shot out. "No, we should all see it. We're her family too." Mr. Winters shook his head. "This one is addressed to Emily only." Mum stared at me like I'd done something disgusting. "Of course. You and your secrets." My hands were shaking. I didn't know what to say, how to defend myself against something I hadn't even done. All I knew was that my inheritance had just turned me into the enemy. We walked out of that office, and from that moment on, I wasn't part of my family anymore. Not really. Outside, on the sidewalk, Cheryl cornered me. "Listen," she said, her voice tight but fake sweet. "There's been a mistake. We know you loved your grandma, and that's cute, but you can't possibly handle the lodge. The property taxes alone." "I can help her," I said automatically. "I work in accounting. You work as an assistant in a strip mall office," Tyler cut in, stepping closer. "You think that qualifies you to run $1 million property?" My ears rang at that number. "A what?" Becca rolled her eyes. "You didn't know? The land alone is worth at least $1.3 million now. There's been talk of a resort developer sniffing around for years. Grandma wouldn't sell, but she told us she was tired, that she wanted to figure out a plan. Guess she figured out one that suited you." There it was. Not grief, not hurt about losing their mum, just anger that the asset had jumped a generation. Mum lit a cigarette with hands that weren't quite steady. "You're not keeping that lodge, Emily. It belongs to all of us. We'll figure out a fair split. You sign it over, we sell it, we share. Simple." Something in me stiffened. That's not what she wanted. She left it to me. Mum's eyes went cold. "Because you manipulated her. Don't stand there and act innocent. You were always the favorite. She never could see how selfish you were." I felt the old familiar words sink into me, all the insults I'd heard as a teenager whenever I didn't immediately do what Mum wanted. Selfish, ungrateful, dramatic. Except now, there was a $1.3 million lodge attached to it. "I need time," I muttered. "I just lost her. Can we—" Can we talk about this later? Cheryl stepped in front of me as I tried to move past. Her perfume was so strong it made my eyes water. We'll talk tomorrow, she said, voice low. At the lodge. Don't make this uglier than it has to be, Em. The next day, I drove up to the lodge with my heart in my throat. I almost turned around twice. Every part of me wanted to avoid the fight, to hand over the keys and run. But then, I pictured Grandma's face the last time I saw her. It was about 3 weeks before she died. We were in the lodge kitchen, and she'd been rubbing her temples a lot that day. You all right, Gran? I'd asked, worried. She'd looked at me long and hard. I'm tired, she'd said. Tired of pretending I don't see what your mother and your aunt are like. They love money more than they love you, Em, more than they ever loved this place. I'd tried to laugh it off. You're being dramatic. No, she'd said quietly. I've been blind. There's a difference. Standing in that gravel driveway now, I wondered if she'd seen this coming. Inside, Mom and Cheryl were already at the big dining table, papers spread out. Tyler and Becca were on their phones, both looking bored. There she is, Cheryl said, like I was late to a job interview. Sit down, we have a lot to go through. There was a thick envelope in front of my chair. I sat slowly and slid it open. Inside was a stack of documents, some kind of family agreement, a power of attorney, and a transfer of ownership form for the lodge. You want me to sign this, I said, my mouth dry. So you can take control of the lodge and then we share? We set up a family trust, Cheryl corrected, tapping one page with a long red nail. Very standard. Your name will still be on it, but the decision-making will be handled by me and your mum. We have more experience. Once the sale happens, you'll get your fair share. I scanned the document. Buried in legal language was a clause giving Cheryl full and unconditional authority over any sale negotiations. Another line said, beneficiaries agree to waive any claim to additional profit or assets derived from related development contracts. My brain did the math. Related development contracts was a very polite way to say side deals. Have you already talked to a buyer? I asked, looking up. Mum's jaw tightened. We've had interest, yes. This is bigger than you, Emily. You can't cling to this place just because you have good memories of baking with Grandma. Why wasn't I told? I asked. Why did she leave it to me if she was planning to sell? Becca snorted. Maybe she changed her mind and didn't get around to changing the paperwork. Becca, Cheryl snapped, then plastered on another smile. Look, Em, we know you loved her. We're not saying you don't deserve anything, but the lodge is a lot of work. Wouldn't it be better to have the money? You could get out of your crappy apartment, get a new car. Pay off your student loans, Tyler added with a smirk. I saw the way your eyes popped at that million word. I stared at the line where I was supposed to sign. If I signed, this would all be over. No more tension, no more being the villain. I could walk away with a lump of cash and pretend this never happened. But another thought slid in. Grandma's voice saying, Don't sell to that man from the company, Em. He doesn't love this place. He just wants to flatten it. I didn't even know who that man was yet. I just knew I suddenly felt sick. I'm not signing anything today, I said, pushing the papers back. Mum slammed her hand on the table. Don't be childish. This is how families handle things. You think you can run a lodge on your own? What about insurance, repairs, taxes? I can learn, I said, my voice shaking. I work with numbers every day. I'm not stupid. You're ungrateful, she snapped. We are trying to help you, and you're throwing it in our faces. She was our mother. She owed us, not you. She didn't owe anyone, I said, standing up. It was her choice. Cheryl's eyes went cold. Well, she said softly, just remember that choices have consequences. I left shaking, sat in my car, and cried until I couldn't see straight. The easiest thing in the world would have been to just give in. But something in me, that stubborn piece I used to hate, wouldn't bend. A few days later, I got my first hint that this was bigger than a family squabble. I was up at the lodge alone, changing beds because I'd decided, screw it, I was going to try running the place for a while. The booking website was still up, and there were a few reservations already paid for. It felt wrong to cancel them. Mrs. Parker, the elderly neighbor from down the road, popped in with a basket of muffins. She'd known my grandma for 40 years. "Your aunt's been buzzing around like a wasp," she said as soon as she stepped in. "She brought some slick-looking man up here last month, showing him around the property like she owned it." My heart lurched. "What man?" "Tall, expensive coat, big truck. Said he was from some development company. Mountain View something." She squinted. "He didn't look at this place like a lodge. He looked at it like a blank space to fill." I felt cold. "Did Grandma show him around?" Mrs. Parker shook her head. "No, she sent him away. Next thing I know, she's telling me she changed her will, said she was putting you in charge so your aunt couldn't sell it out from under her. That's how she put it." It felt like the room tilted. Grandma hadn't just randomly left it to me out of favoritism, she was protecting it. Protecting me. That night, back in town, I went to the county records office website on my laptop. I typed in the property address and pulled up every document attached to it. My work at the accounting office had made me weirdly good at reading this boring stuff. One thing jumped out immediately. A new lien filed 3 months before Grandma died. A $150,000 loan using the lodge as collateral, co-signed by Ruth Carter and Cheryl Davis. Except, Grandma had never mentioned a loan to me. And the signature, even zoomed in, looked just slightly off. The R in Ruth looked like it had been copied from somewhere. A sick feeling pooled in my gut. The next day, I asked Mr. Winters about it. I drove back to Denver, sat in his office, clutching a paper coffee cup. "Did you know about this lien?" I asked. He adjusted his glasses, studied the screen, then frowned. "I did not. Your grandmother was very open with me about major financial decisions. This is unusual. Could she have done it when she was not herself?" I asked. "Like, when she was confused?" He shook his head. "If she'd been that confused, I would not have allowed her to sign a new will. These dates overlap. Something is off here." We stared at the screen together. That little line of text suddenly felt like a weapon my aunt was holding to my throat. If the lodge didn't sell, who was supposed to pay that $150,000 back? Mr. Winters sighed. "Emily, I'm going to be very frank with you. You need your own attorney. Someone who represents only you, because what I'm seeing here could indicate financial abuse. Maybe worse." I wanted to throw up. "Are you saying my aunt forged?" "I'm saying," he replied carefully, "that this deserves a closer look. You may be in for a fight." He gave me a card. Priya Patel, probate and estate litigation. My hand shook as I dialed her number in the parking lot. Meeting Ms. Patel was the first step in my revenge, even though I didn't think of it that way yet. She was in her late 30s, sharp eyes, no-nonsense voice. "Tell me everything," she said, clicking her pen. I poured it all out. The will reading, the pressure to sign, the neighbor's story about the developer, the suspicious lien. She listened without interrupting, then leaned back. "This isn't just about hurt feelings," she said. "This is about power and money. Your grandmother tried to put a barrier between your aunt and this property, and your aunt is trying to knock it down." "So what do?" I asked, feeling small. "We start quietly," she said. "We pull all the bank records attached to the lodge. We see who really benefited from that loan. We get a handwriting expert to look at your grandmother's signature on the lien compared to other documents. We look for patterns of withdrawals or transfers. And we do not, under any circumstances, sign anything they put in front of you." "What if they take me to court?" I whispered. "What if they try to overturn the will?" She actually smiled a little. "Then we'll be ready. And sometimes, the best revenge is just being prepared when the other side underestimates you." 2 days later, My mum gave me the first taste of what that fight would look like. I came out of my apartment one morning to find 3 of my neighbors whispering in the hallway, giving me weird looks. One of them, Amy, finally pulled me aside. Hey, did your family really say you manipulated your grandma? My cousin follows your cousin Becca on Instagram. She posted this whole story about gold digger nieces and elder abuse. It sounded like she was talking about you. My stomach dropped. I opened Instagram, found Becca's story. There it was. A series of vague black background posts about being cut out of an inheritance by someone who pretended to be close to Grandma for money. Justice will be served. And a blurry shot of the lodge with the caption, "She thinks she won, not for long." Thousands of views, comments like, "People are disgusting" and "Take her to court." They were already trying to paint me as some kind of villain online. Mum texted that afternoon, "You brought this on yourself. We warned you. Sign the agreement and we can make this go away." I stared at the message for a long time, then did something I'd never done with my mum before. I didn't reply. Up at the lodge that weekend, I was changing linen in one of the rooms when something small and metallic clinked onto the floor. A key. It had been taped under the bed slat. There was a tiny label on it. Bank Box, PC Branch. My heart raced. Pine Crest Branch. That was the little bank in town where Grandma did her business. I drove there first thing Monday morning, palms sweating. The teller checked my ID, then led me to a small room with a safe deposit box. Inside was a thin stack of papers, a USB drive, and a handwritten note on Grandma's floral stationery. M. If you're reading this, it means I'm gone, and, most likely, your mother and aunt are making a mess of things. I'm sorry, love. I wanted to spare you this, but there's only so much I can do from the grave. I've seen too many little loans and favors go through my accounts in the last few years. Your aunt has been using my credit line for her business, and your mum has been less than honest with some of your details, too. I've spoken to Mr. Winters. I tried to confront them. It did not go well. You were the only one who ever loved this place for what it is, not what it might be worth. That's why I left it to you, not to make you rich, but to give you something solid and yours in a world that has always tried to take from you. On the USB, you'll find copies of my bank statements, my will, notes from my doctor about my mental state, and a recording of a meeting I had with the man from the company, as I call him. He came with your aunt trying to talk me into signing something. I pretended to be more confused than I was. That's one thing about getting old. People underestimate you. I let him talk. I recorded every word. Don't trust them, Em. Use the law. Don't sink to their level. But don't let them bully you out of what I wanted you to have. Love always. Gran. I sat there in that little bank room, tears blurring my vision, clutching that letter. She knew. She had seen exactly what they were like, and she had left me a trail. At Ms. Patel's office that afternoon, we plugged in the USB. Bank statements popped up, showing a lot of money moving out of the lodge's business account over the past 2 years, payments to some Davis Insurance Consulting, large cash withdrawals, charges at a casino 2 towns over. There was also a video file. We hit play. The footage was grainy, from a little camera hidden somewhere in Grandma's living room. I saw her, thin but upright, sitting in her favorite armchair. On the sofa were Cheryl and a man in a blazer with a Mountain View Developments logo. "Just a formality, Mrs. Carter," he was saying. "We would keep the historic feel of the place. You'd be very well compensated, and your daughters would be taken care of." Grandma tilted her head. "And my granddaughter?" she asked. "Emily?" Cheryl rolled her eyes. "Mum, Emily has no interest in this stuff. She's not business-minded. We talked about this. We'd handle things. She'd get something small, of course." The man smiled. "Our offer is $800,000 for the lodge and land, and there's a separate consulting agreement for your daughters, a finder's fee, off the record." He slid a folder across the table. In it, I could just make out a contract and a check with lots of zeros. I'm tired, Grandma murmured. My eyes aren't what they were. Maybe I should get my lawyer to look at this. Cheryl's voice shifted, sharper. Mom, that's not necessary. We're just trying to help you. Don't you trust us? Grandma smiled, that sweet, harmless smile she used sometimes. Of course I do, she said. But I'm old, not stupid. Leave it with me. The recording cut off there. Ms. Patel whistled softly. There it is, a secret side deal. Your aunt was going to get a big chunk from that developer on top of the sale, and your grandmother knew enough to play along and then shut it down. My chest tightened. So they were already planning to sell, before she changed the will. Exactly, she said. And now, guess what? That developer is still probably circling. Your aunt and mom figured if they could get you to sign that family trust, they could revive that deal. How do we stop them? I asked. She smiled, but it wasn't a warm smile. It was razor sharp. We don't just stop them, Emily. We expose what they're doing. But first, we let them think they're winning. So that's what I did. I played dumb. I texted Mom, maybe we should talk again about the lodge. I'm overwhelmed. She replied in seconds. Finally, some sense. Dinner tomorrow? Cheryl will be there. The next night, I showed up at Cheryl's big, showy house with a cheap recorder app running on my phone in my pocket. Colorado is a one-party consent state. Ms. Patel had made sure I knew that. As long as I was part of the conversation, I could record it. Over pasta and wine I paid for myself. I let them do most of the talking. We're not trying to cut you out, Cheryl said, refilling my glass like we were old friends. You sign this trust, we go back to Mountain View, we get the sale pushed through. 800 grand, maybe more now. After fees and the loan payoff, you'd be looking at 200,000. She glanced at Mum. Mum nodded briskly. Easily. And we would handle all the complicated stuff. You wouldn't have to worry. I swallowed hard. What about your consulting fees? I asked, keeping my voice casual. The ones off the record. Cheryl froze for a fraction of a second, then laughed too loudly. Oh, honey, that was just a theoretical thing, nothing set in stone. But you did talk to them about it, I pressed. Grandma recorded your meeting, you know. The air went thick. Mum's fork clinked against her plate. What did you just say? She whispered. I'm just saying. I backpedaled quickly, heart pounding. You're the smart ones. I know I'd be leaning on you for everything. I just want to be sure we're fair. That's all. They relaxed a little. By the end of the night, I walked out with them on tape admitting that yes, they'd had a plan with the developer. Yes, they thought Grandma had been too stubborn to go along. And yes, they thought leaving me the lodge was ridiculous. 2 weeks later, they escalated. I got an official-looking envelope in the mail. A petition, filed in probate court, to contest my grandmother's will on the grounds of undue influence and lack of capacity. Petitioners, Linda Carter and Cheryl Davis. They were suing me. They were asking the court to throw out the will, to freeze the lodge, to put everything back in the estate so it could be divided according to intestacy or some older document. They accused me of manipulating an elderly, confused woman into cutting out her rightful heirs. I took that envelope straight to Ms. Patel. This is good, she said calmly after reading it. I stared at her. Good? They've put their intentions on record, she said. Now we get to show the court the other side, the recordings, the bank statements, the safe deposit box letter, the suspicious lien, and the best part, the more they push, the more they open themselves up to scrutiny. In the meantime, they stepped up their smear campaign. Mum started calling my relatives, crying on the phone about how I'd stolen her home and ruined her retirement. My uncle on my dad's side called me one night and said, Your mum's saying some pretty harsh stuff, Em. That you isolated your grandma, that you made her sign things she didn't understand. I choked out, You really think I did that? He was quiet for a long time. I don't know what to think, he admitted. Be careful. The worst blow came when I checked my own credit report on Ms. Patel's suggestion and found out my mom had opened 2 credit cards in my name when I was 19. They had been quietly sent to her address, maxed out, unpaid. Collections had been chasing them. It explained so much about why I'd always had such a hard time getting approved for anything. She'd done that to me years ago, stolen my name, my credit, and now she was trying to steal my inheritance and my reputation too. I sat in my car outside the credit union parking lot and sobbed until I could barely breathe. Part of me wanted to throw everything at them, post the recordings online, blast them on social media, ruin their lives like they were trying to ruin mine. But then I heard Grandma in my head again. Use the law, don't sink to their level. So I took a different path. Ms. Patel helped me file formal complaints, one with the bank about the suspicious lien, another with the state's Adult Protective Services hotline about potential elder financial abuse, and another with the state insurance regulator about Cheryl's consulting business, which, as it turned out, had been quietly dipping into Grandma's accounts for years. We also hired a forensic document examiner. She compared Grandma's known signatures on her will, her old checks, and the medical letters with the signature on that $150,000 loan. Her report was clear. The questioned signature on the lien is inconsistent with the known samples and shows signs of simulation. In my professional opinion, it is likely forged. We added that to our growing file. Then, a small twist of luck came from an unexpected place: the developer himself. One afternoon, I was at a coffee shop in town, hunched over my laptop, when a guy about my age approached me. "Excuse me," he said, hesitating. "Are you Emily Carter?" I stiffened. "Who's asking?" He sat down without waiting for me to invite him. "My name's Nate. I used to do marketing for Mountain View Developments. I recognize you from a photo in one of our internal files. Your aunt showed our boss your picture. Called you the obstacle." I stared at him. "Why are you telling me this?" He glanced around, then lowered his voice. "I quit last month. The way they were talking about pressuring you, it didn't sit right. Your aunt was shopping around a signed document, a draft of a trust, saying she'd have control of the lodge soon. They were already sketching out plans to bulldoze half the property." My stomach turned. "I never signed anything." "I know," he said. "They were just that confident. Look, I can't exactly testify about my old company's shady ethics without risking a lawsuit, but I can tell you this. Check the county planning office. They've already had informal consultations about rezoning your land, and there's a side agreement in their emails about a $100,000 advisory fee to your aunt and your mum." My chest felt too tight. "Do you have a copy?" He nodded. I forwarded some things to my personal email before I left. It was bugging me. I can't have them traced back to me officially, but I can give you enough to know what's going on. That night, I handed Ms. Patel printouts of emails between Cheryl, the developer, and a lawyer, casually discussing how, once we get the granddaughter to sign over her interest, they could move forward with Phase 1 and disburse the consultant fees as agreed. "Emily," Ms. Patel said quietly, looking at the pages, "this is exactly the kind of thing judges hate. Secret side deals, taking advantage of an elderly woman, plotting around a will. Your grandmother picked the right person to protect this place." The day of the first court hearing, I sat in a stiff wooden pew in the probate courtroom, palms slick, heart thudding. Mum and Cheryl were on the other side of the aisle with their lawyer, a smooth man in an expensive suit. They didn't look at me. The judge, a woman in her 50s with sharp eyes, called the case. Lawyers did their lawyer thing, arguing about capacity and influence. Cheryl's lawyer painted a picture of a confused old woman under the spell of a greedy granddaughter. "Ms. Carter isolated her grandmother in the final months," he said, his voice all fake concern. "She controlled who saw her, manipulated her finances, and then suddenly, miraculously, this new will appears, cutting out the natural heirs. It has all the hallmarks of undue influence." I wanted to scream. Instead, I gripped the edge of the bench until my knuckles went white. Then it was Ms. Patel's turn. Your Honor, she began, we have a very different story to tell. One of two adult daughters who saw their mother's property not as a home or a legacy, but as a payday. She laid it out piece by piece. The bank statements showing large transfers to Cheryl's business, the forged lien, the developer emails, the video recording of the meeting in Grandma's living room, the mental capacity letters from Grandma's doctor, the safe deposit box letter. When the video played on the monitor at the front of the courtroom, I watched the judge's expression carefully. At the moment where Grandma said, "I'm old, not stupid," I could have sworn I saw the judge's mouth twitch. Then came the recordings I'd made at Cheryl's house. The judge listened to Cheryl's own voice say things like, "We'll sign M onto the trust for show, but we'll be in charge," and "Grandma should have just sold when we told her to." Mum flinched when her own words came out. "She owes us, not you." When it was over, the judge's voice was like ice. "Mrs. Davis, Ms. Carter," she said slowly, "I'm going to give your attorney a chance to respond to this new evidence, but I will tell you now, I am concerned. Deeply." Their lawyer spluttered about context and private family discussions, but the damage was done. The judge kept the will contest open, but ordered a full accounting of Grandma's finances for the past 3 years. She also ordered them to stop contacting me directly and to stay away from the lodge until the case was resolved. That was the first time I felt a small flicker of power. It wasn't revenge yet, not fully. But it was a line in the sand. Over the next months, as their finances were peeled open like an onion, more rot was exposed. Cheryl had used Grandma's accounts to prop up her failing insurance business, moving money around to hide losses. Mum had quietly taken loans that had never been documented. There were casino withdrawals that matched Cheryl's girls' trips. There were payments made on those old credit cards in my name, just enough to keep them from collections before Grandma died. Then nothing after, leaving me with the mess. The state insurance regulator opened an investigation into Cheryl's business practices. The bank started their own internal review. Someone from Adult Protective Services showed up on Cheryl's doorstep to ask questions about possible elder abuse. Everything they'd built on lies started to wobble. One evening, months into this, Mum showed up at my apartment building. She wasn't allowed to contact me during the case, and she knew it, but there she was in the parking lot, arms folded, looking older than I remembered. "Can we talk?" she called. I hesitated, then walked over but stayed a good few feet away. "We're not supposed to." She scoffed. "Since when do you care about rules? You broke the biggest one. You don't betray your family." "I didn't betray anyone," I said quietly. "You did. To Grandma. To me. To yourselves." Her face twisted. "Oh, listen to you, high and mighty. Just because some judge likes your little sob story. You think any of this would be happening if you hadn't shown those bank papers to those vultures? Your aunt's business might go under. We could lose our house. Is that what you want?" Tears stung my eyes. I didn't forge Grandma's signature. I didn't steal her money. I didn't trash my own daughter's credit behind her back. You did that. Both of you. I just stopped you from doing more. She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Stopped us? You've ruined us, Emily." I swallowed. "I offered through Ms. Patel a settlement. Remember? Drop the will contest, cancel the sale plans, and I wouldn't push for criminal charges. I'd even help with some of your debt. But you refused. You chose this." Her eyes flashed. "We are your mother and your aunt. You don't give us terms. We give you terms." I looked at her, really looked at her, and realized that I'd been living my whole life like that was true. Like I had to take what I was given, even if it hurt me. "Not anymore," I said softly. "You taught me to be small. Grandma taught me something else. I'm choosing her lesson now." She opened her mouth, then closed it. "You're going to regret this," she whispered. "Blood is blood. When they're done with us, they'll come for you." "The difference," I said, "is I haven't done anything I'm afraid to have looked at." She left then, tires squealing. I went upstairs and cried, but somewhere under the tears was a strange, fierce calm. Revenge, I was realizing, didn't always look like shouting or throwing things. Sometimes it looked like standing firm while the people who hurt you watched their own actions catch up with them. The final hearing came 9 months after the first. By then, Cheryl's business license had been suspended pending investigation. The bank had formally declared the $150,000 lien fraudulent, removing it from the property. The developer had pulled their interest from the lodge, citing legal complications, and quietly cut ties with Cheryl. In court, their lawyer looked tired. Mine looked ready. The judge summarized everything in a voice that left no room for argument. Ruth Carter executed a valid will with full capacity, leaving her lodge to her granddaughter. The evidence of undue influence by the granddaughter is weak at best, and utterly overshadowed by the evidence of financial misconduct by the petitioners. The court denies the petition to set aside the will. The will is upheld. Mom dropped her head into her hands. Cheryl stared straight ahead, jaw clenched. The judge wasn't done. Furthermore, she continued, this court is referring the matter of the forged lien and the misappropriation of Mrs. Carter's funds to the district attorney's office for review. This bench does not have criminal jurisdiction, but I find the evidence troubling. You could have heard a pin drop. When we walked out into the hallway, reporters weren't waiting. This wasn't that kind of case. But I felt like the whole town could feel the shift. I owned the lodge, free and clear. My family's attempts to take it had not just failed, they'd blown up in their faces. A few weeks later, charges were filed against Cheryl: forgery, fraud, and exploitation of an at-risk adult. She took a plea deal: probation, restitution, community service, the permanent loss of her professional license. Mom wasn't charged, but the bank demanded repayment of some of the loans she'd taken. They put a lien on her house instead. I'd like to say I felt nothing but satisfaction. There was satisfaction, yes, but there was also grief. Grief that my relationship with my mom was so broken that it took a judge and a pile of legal documents to prove what my gut had been whispering for years. She would always choose money and appearances over me. In the months that followed, I threw myself into the lodge. I fixed the leaky roof Grandma had been worried about. I painted the guest rooms. I updated the booking website. I hired a local couple to help with cleaning and breakfasts. One quiet evening, as the sun sank behind the mountains and the air smelled like pine and fresh coffee, I sat on the porch steps with a box I'd found in Grandma's closet. At the bottom was another letter, yellowed around the edges. M. If you're holding this, it means the lodge is really yours now. Here's my last piece of meddling. Don't let this place become just a monument to what your mother and aunt did. Don't let anger eat you. Turn it into something good. You always said you wanted to help people but didn't know how. Well, here's how. Use the lodge. Make it a place where people come to rest after the world has chewed them up. And when you stand on that porch, don't think of what was almost taken from you. Think of what you protected. You're stronger than you know. I saw it before you did. Love always. Gran, I cried again reading that, but these tears were different, softer, less bitter. The next year, I started something new at Pinecrest Lodge. On top of being a regular B&B, I set aside a few weekends a year for women who needed a break, from toxic families, bad breakups, burnout. I offered steep discounts, sometimes free stays if they couldn't pay. People started calling it the Healing Lodge in online reviews. Word spread. Business picked up. The lodge, the thing that had exposed my family's true colors, became a place where other women could face their own truths. As for Mom and Cheryl, karma settled over them like a slow, steady snow. Cheryl had to sell her fancy house to start paying back what she owed. The woman who used to brag about her connections now worked behind the counter at a friend's shop in town, people whispering when she passed. Mom downsized to a small rental. Every so often I'd hear from a cousin that she'd been complaining about how ungrateful I was, how I destroyed her life. I never responded. I did, however, tell Ms. Patel not to pursue any civil damages against her for the credit cards. That wasn't for her, that was for me. I didn't want to tie myself to her with more court dates and more anger. The last time I saw my mum in person was by accident. She came into the lodge's cafe one afternoon, not realizing I'd started opening it up to locals during the slow season. She froze when she saw me behind the counter, in an apron, wiping down mugs. I froze too. For a moment, we just stared at each other. She looked older, smaller somehow. I felt a mix of things: hurt, anger, pity, a weird ache. "This place looks nice," she said at last, her voice barely above a whisper. "Thanks," I replied. "I think Grandma would like it." Her eyes shimmered, then hardened. "She would be horrified at what you did to your family." I took a breath. She left me everything I needed to see exactly what my family did to her. To me. She trusted me with the truth. We stood there in that painful silence. Finally, she shook her head. "You chose her," she said. "Over us." "No," I said quietly. "I chose me." She left without ordering anything. That night, sitting on the porch with a blanket around my shoulders, I realized I wasn't waiting for her to come around anymore. I wasn't waiting for an apology. My revenge was already complete. Not because they were punished, though part of me still felt a dark, satisfied curl in my chest when I thought about Cheryl's probation, about the way doors had quietly shut to her. No. The real revenge was that their scheme had backfired so completely that the one person they'd underestimated their whole lives, the quiet granddaughter, the overlooked daughter, was the one who came out standing. The lodge was supposed to be their jackpot. Instead, it became a monument to their own greed. Every person in town knew why Grandma had left it to me and not to them. They were exposed, not by me shouting it from rooftops, but by their own actions dragged into the light of a courtroom. Sometimes, late at night, I still hear their words in my head: selfish, manipulative, ungrateful. When that happens, I walk through the empty hallways of the lodge, run my fingers along the worn wooden banister Grandma polished for years, and remind myself of the facts. I didn't steal anything. I protected what was mine and what she wanted me to have. I didn't ruin my family. They ruined themselves by valuing money over love, over honesty, over their own mother's wishes. My grandma's $1.3 million lodge didn't turn me into a different person. It showed me who I really was. Someone stronger, more stubborn, more loyal to the truth than I ever realized, and it exposed them. People say revenge is about getting even. For me, it was about finally tipping the scale back to where it always should have been, not with fists or screaming, but with documents, patience, and a fierce refusal to be bullied one more time. So when I stand on that porch now, watching the sun sink behind the peaks, I don't think about the fight in court, or the nights I cried myself to sleep. I think about my grandma's handwriting on those letters. I think about the women who come here to rest and leave a little lighter. I think about the girl I used to be, small, apologizing for existing, and the woman who stood up in front of a judge and said, "No, this is mine." In the end, justice was simple. The truth came out, they were shut down, and I kept the lodge. That's my story. That's how my grandma's $1.3 million lodge exposed my family's true colors, and how, for the first time in my life, I chose myself instead of their lies.